All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, we're back on Wheel of Time, and we're not specifically talking about the show this time, though I'm sure there will be comments about it, because one of the topics is Moghedien and her role in both the books and the show. I'll be breaking her down kind of psychologically, and you'll be bringing up forum stuff on her. And we're also going to hit Asmodean today because that one's a special one for me. So if you don't like our talk on Moghedien, like recheck in for the Asmodean one because you're probably going to get some crazy shit out of that one. But we got a comment from last time. Well, we kind of have a back and forth from last time. We did a whole episode on how we got our most controversial episode was the last show one. And one person did respond to my response to them. And, he says, "Why would I hate you? We share a love for the same wonderful book series," which is hopefully true. That's what can be so frustrating about these conversations. I agree. Okay. And I kind of skimmed through this, so I'm going to break it down here. But what we really don't like is that book lovers who hate the show enough to emphatically wish upon its demise for the detriment of those of us who really enjoy the show. I happen to really enjoy it and want to see it finished, and there are millions of show watchers who are in the same camp as me. So, yes, wishing for the show not to continue will hurt the rest of us who really like it. He also said, but your points are moot anyways. There could be hundreds of things that went wrong with the show that you don't like. It's writing, acting, directing, blah, blah, blah. The fact of the matter is that it is the TV series we got. Okay, so that's all. Oh, those are all very good, very valid points in this discussion. So if you're one of the tunes in for 5 minutes and then leaves a comment or hits dislike or whatever, here's your 5 minutes right here. This is what time will tell.
Hmm.
Okay. Because if it is not going on, it's not because we hated it and hated in a way that made it not continue. It is because it wasn't what we wanted and they didn't do a good enough job. The fact that you liked it, kudos to you. I'm glad you enjoyed something. Okay. But a lot of the book lovers, and if it doesn't continue, that means more than not, right? Are not liking a lot of the things that go on. And we're just on YouTube articulating it. Okay.
Hmm.
You may not like our points, or you may agree with them and think they're not important, hence the word moot, right? But we've actually resist the urge to nitpick too much because we started off doing that and it became just we didn't have enough time. Okay. We actually are trying to hit the major points. And from a book lover standpoint, the major question we keep asking with some of these changes is why? Because you didn't need to do so. And I'm assuming you didn't stick around to the end last time. I showed why. Get on Google Gemini and just look up Rafe Judkins' motivations for the thing he's done. And it gives you a very honest answer and sources his own words. He is an activist and he is using that activism through something that we all love and enjoy, and there was no need to do so. That's our biggest complaint, and that's why I mean we'll keep doing this. Obviously, we're still watching it because right now it's kind of like our unpaid job, you know. But at the same time,
Well, I take exception to his point. What did he say here? His last sentence, I happen to really enjoy it. Fine. I've used this analogy before, but I did not watch the two biggest shows of the 90s, Seinfeld and Friends. It didn't do it for me.
mhm.
I friends would watch it and I would chuckle every once in a while, but I would frequently think, I don't get it. I don't understand why these are the two and and there wasn't a close second. Those were the two biggest shows of the 90s by far. And it's like it doesn't do it for me, but if it does it for you,
Mhm.
fine, whatever.
Well,
Well,
one of the points I made that I don't think he directly addressed, but it might be the moot point thing, is that I said you could have had your cake and eat it too. Because if it had been made more honestly and with the real book fans, okay, let me rephrase that because obviously you're a real book fan too. With the majority of book fans in mind, you could have still had the show you wanted. In
Hmm.
fact, my point was you might have actually even liked it better. I've had amazing steak. And then I went to this place in Houston with one of my baseball players after he got a new contract, and I had a steak that was amazing, amazing, amazing steak. And I was blown away. I have never had a steak that good again. You're having an amazing steak right now for you.
Hmm.
You love it. You love the way you cook it. You love the way it's made for you or whatever. But there was a source material that got so many people behind it that is the second leading fiction fantasy series in the history of the world, not the West, not America, not Texas, the entire world.
Hmm.
And I mean, maybe the third behind the Bible, but that's a different conversation for us. It's had to throw
Well,
that one in there. Sorry, Heath.
well, no, it's because that is what is the point that is frequently made about Tolkien and just how ludicrously successful the Lord of the Rings are is that it is second only to the Bible. That's a big effing deal.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
the book that the printing press was invented for.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
got a head start.
So that tells you that even if you don't get it, there is a there there. All right.
So
I
no,
didn't
we
get
appreciate your
Seinfeld and
comment.
Friends, but there's
Yeah.
clearly a there there.
We appreciate your comment, Lance, and
But
thank you very much for being respectful in the
but
comment
let me
section.
get to where I take exception though, and I think um your bias is showing through because you say you like the show. But the problem I have with this last sentence is, and there are millions of show watchers who are in the same camp as me. I don't think that's true.
That's the thing. That was my point of what time would tell, because if there were millions enough, it would continue. And
That
you will have your
now
cake.
maybe with season three, but as I've said before, and other people cover this stuff more directly, the Geeks and Gamers guys, Nerdrotic, Film Threat, they talk about the technical details of how and why these streaming services all are obtuse when it comes to their numbers. And when they give a number, they don't tell you how they get that number. YouTube is actually more transparent because it will tell you minutes watched. So
Hmm.
it's not just this video has this many views, but at least on the producer side, you can look and you can see, okay, but for how long did the viewers actually stick around?
Hmm.
And,
Yeah,
and
and,
that is
and and when
something
you're
they won't.
dealing with numbers like we have, if we have 300 views, I think that was that episode, and
Hmm.
the average view is 8 minutes, but I
Hmm.
know 10 people that watched the whole thing. That tells me that the median is probably lower than 8 minutes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and people are making very widespread comments with basically getting to where we are right now, which is the intro to the actual
Yes.
show. And
Yes. And so something that has been pointed out a lot and needs to be kept in mind is with things like Rings of Power, which they have touted the numbers on, but that is something that will autoplay,
this happened
and they
with
count that as a
Twitter
view.
slash X before, because
Hmm.
if it flies across my feed as I'm scrolling, it counts as a view. Whereas if I actually click on it, there's a different number. And they
Uh-huh.
were talking about these people having views, but they were pushing them forward on people's feeds. So they would just scroll by them and be like, never mind, never mind, never mind, never mind. But it counted as a view.
Yeah. So um to that point, I made this example last time and I'll reiterate it because I think it was towards the ends. Maybe you didn't see it, maybe you stuck around. To me, what you are doing with defending not just this show, but shows like it that do similar things. I was just watching a video on the Netflix adaptation of Devil May Cry, and I never played the game, so I don't care. But this person had, and it was funny to watch his reaction because I was like, oh, that must be how I sound when I'm talking about Prime's so-called Wheel of Time. But it is like those restaurant rescue shows with Gordon Ramsay or one of these other guys that goes in there and they're no, you have to you need to make these changes to attract customers. Well, we do it this way because of our regulars. What regulars? You've got three people in the dining room during the lunch rush. That's who you're holding on to.
Hmm.
You're so obsessed with these three people that come in every lunch, you're completely ignoring the 30 empty tables you have.
Let me add another layer to this whole conversation for Lance here and anybody who is in the same opinion boat as him. The pressure of the fans is what causes change, but not the haters. So
Mm-hmm,
we would be lumped in the hater crowd, right? So the things we say aren't going to change Rafe Junkin's position or Amazon's position
mm-hmm.
unless they really want to do another season and they want the numbers from bringing people back, which I think they tried to do here until the last episode in season 3. But you should be demanding better because you said you love the books,
Mm-hmm.
right? You should be at least semi-critical saying, okay, I gave it an 8 because I enjoyed it, but I didn't give it a 10 because there was this and this and this and this that I thought they could have done better. And I'm worried for the future of the show if they don't start doing it. That's where you can come in. I mean, it's your our mission is the same. It's just we come from it from a less satisfied perspective than you.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
I actually curious if you are listening to this, Lance, what's your age? Because
hmm.
the way cinema is now versus then, I think that might have something to do with it. And so that actually that could be part of the disconnect too here because we're comparing book to show, but we also might be indirectly comparing shows from when we were your
You
age
know,
to shows that
that's a
are
really
now.
good point, and I don't remember who I was listening to recently that was talking about TV, and somebody made the point of um one of the worst drop-offs from season 1 to season 2, and they mentioned Altered Carbon. And it
It
occurred to
was.
me,
It was.
it occurred to me that that's a great illustration of what you just mentioned there, because if Altered Carbon season 2 would have been the first season of Altered Carbon on the Sci-Fi Channel in the late 2000s, early 2010s, people would have thought it was great.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, hey, they've got another one. This is their follow-up to Stargate, to Battlestar Galactica. This is their follow-up to that, and it's on par with that. The problem was season 1 was literally some of the best television, one of the best shows ever on streaming,
Maybe
ever
the
made
best
for and on
recommendation you ever
streams.
gave me for a show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how good the first season went. That's the problem.
Well, and I
I
think a lot of the younger viewers don't understand what good acting is. We just really haven't seen a whole lot of it in the last 15 years, probably. And so if you're 25 years old, you haven't seen a lot of it since you were 10 years old. We're talking like heyday Jack Nicholson, uh,
that's a good point of um but on the other hand, uh there has been good stuff, because like this same group, when they were talking about good TV, they mentioned Breaking Bad. I still haven't gotten around to watching it. I've heard it's awesome, but that's not that
the
old.
first 3 seasons is awesome, but after that, it kind of got started getting old.
Okay,
I
okay.
never finished it because it just started dragging on.
But that is widely considered phenomenal TV, and more importantly, a great character study, a great character arc. Um, I wanna. All right, hold on a second. Let me see if I can quiet you. Um, so I have recently. Come on, where are you? Yeah, all right. So I mentioned this before, is that um Drinker uses this as a great example in one of his why modern movies
I
suck.
have it to where you could, yeah, I do. Okay.
And So I'll share without sound so we don't have to worry about copyright.
God, that's the one thing about YouTube, man.
Yeah. But to me, this is one of the greatest moments in all of cinema, this one
Mm.
particular scene. And this,
Why you gotta make me cry on online?
because it's fun. But I just recently we watched this with my son because it just kind of dawned on me. We were busy watching other things and he was busy with, school and sports and stuff. And we just never get around to watching Star Trek together. And they have Paramount Plus. So a while back when I was there, I was like, hey, you know what? You haven't watched this. And I'm sitting here on Paramount Plus looking at other stuff. Let's watch this. So we watched Star Trek 2. And um
I mean, even his face there is better than any of the acting we got in these last three seasons.
exactly.
Yeah.
Spock's death scene is a master class in acting, directing, cinematography, editing, and it is so subdued. That was Drinker's point when he compared and contrasted this scene from Star Trek Into Darkness, J.J. Abrams' bad copy of Wrath of Khan. And as I was watching it, I noticed little things like so watch when for those of you just listening, so Spock's on the ground, he stands up with much difficulty because he is literally dying, and right there, just that little thing of, and I don't know if that was a direction thing or if that was just Nimoy knows the character so well. He stands up with great difficulty, and then he takes just half a second to straighten his uniform, and then he turns around
Mm.
because this is not only his friend, but this is his admiral. And Spock being Spock, he is going to straighten his uniform, and then he is going to go up and report, and the rest of the scene plays out. And there is none of that. So one of the great GIF slash memes of all of the internet is Shatner yelling Khan. And it's so over the top. And so people think of that as acting. And that's just one scene. In the scene that matters, the scene where one of his best friends dies in front of
Hmm.
him, and then a little bit later when they have the funeral for Spock, he is very subdued and it makes it all the more powerful.
Well, and compare that to Wheel of Time, since that's what we're on. Lan after Steppen dies.
Yeah.
And actually, Peter
uh,
Frenzen, who played
Recently
Steppen,
watched that. Yeah.
was probably one of the better actors in the whole show. I'm glad. I hate that he had to die early in the series, especially since this character doesn't die in the books. But uh, this person, but they also got the best actor to pull that off
Mhm.
because he played his I am tricking you. Spoiler alert if you haven't watched the series. If you've gotten this far, you probably have. He played the I'm tricking you into helping me kill myself so good all the way to the very end. And then we had a scene to follow it up that was the opposite of what you just brought up. So you just talked about Spock being Leonard Nimoy being so good and Shatner being so good in response. That's the kind of things we're talking about. So if you want to say moot point, it's not moot point. This is what we expect, especially
Mhm.
when you're trying to represent something as huge as the Wheel of Time. And if we are allowed to go ahead and complain about that, you may agree or disagree or say, okay, I agree, but I still like the show. Oh, that's all fine. That's all fine. But
Speaking of subdued, this is where I wanted to start today, actually getting into what we wanted to talk about is I was looking up something and I had forgotten. So this is The Shadow Rising, chapter 30 something, 38, I think. 38, Hidden Faces in Tanchico. So in the first edition paperback, it's page 631, and this is Leandrin's point of view. Um, the merchant had furnished a few servants, all sworn to the great lord, he assured them, but barely enough to provide for 11 women who rarely stirred outside. One, a sturdily handsome, dark-braided woman called Gildan was sweeping the entry hall's red and white tiles when Leandrin entered. Where are the others? She demanded. In the front withdrawing room, Gildan gestured to the double arched doors to the right, as though Leandrin might not know where that was. Leandrin's mouth tightened. The woman did not curtsy. She used no titles of respect. True, she did not know who Leandrin really was, but Gildan certainly knew she was high enough to give orders and be obeyed. To send that fat merchant bowing and scraping and bundling his family off to some hovel. You are supposed to be cleaning, yes? Not standing about? Well, clean! There is dust everywhere. If I find a speck of the dust this evening, you cow, you, I will have you beaten. That's Moghedien.
Mm-hmm.
That is our first introduction to the spider. Is we don't even know it's her. It is a apparently very low ranking and not too bright servant who is a dark friend. And that's Moghedien.
Mm-hmm.
There is a reason she is the spider. And that is why that is a perfect introduction to this person who we have heard referenced before, but this is the first time meeting her, and we don't know that for a little while.
Yeah, and instead in the show, we got her capturing Lanfear as the first time you meet her
Mm-hmm.
in a spider web, so you know she's the spider.
Mm-hmm. It
Yes.
is not until, so that was chapter 38, and it is not until chapter 46 that we actually meet Moghedien as Moghedien.
Mm-hmm.
But we we see evidence of her manipulations, of her machinations.
Mm-hmm. And
They
and according to the cheat book here, she wasn't even ordered to be there. She just figured it out. She figured out what was going on with those ladies, and she is like, you know what? If I get here, something good is gonna happen.
this is the Black Ajah, meaning they are acting under the orders of Baalzamon, who is no
Mhm.
more, and Moradin hasn't shown up yet.
And we
So
know from
they're
later probably Masana.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
later Masana, who takes over in the tower. So this is the Black Ajah coasting on their last orders, and Moghedien going, I see an opportunity here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the companion handy?
Right here. That's why I said the cheat book.
Okay, so I thought this was a joke. There's an this should make for a relatively short episode, but annoyingly, there's not a lot in the Q&A database on Moghedien or Asmodean, who we'll get to, but
Well, and I will say the
something
way they wrote her part of the companion was like she did this, she did this, she did this, she did
mhm.
that. Da, 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 da. It was very straightforward, matter of fact, and boring, actually. So,
So something that I had seen RJ say before. I had seen this statement before I went looking into the Q&A. Um, I thought it was a joke, and then here it is in the wiki, so I assume it's also in the cheat book. Lilin Morale was an investment advisor.
yeah, what does it say? Yeah, advisor for investments is what it says. It says, but then they never explain what that means.
No,
She was
but
basically the Madoff of.
exactly. That was so
Yeah.
so the statement that I thought was a joke was RJ saying that um before the bore was drilled, Moghedien was like I think the way he phrased it was an asset manager before the FTC got on her case. It's like, oh wait, no, he wasn't kidding. Um but in reference, the reason Moghedien and Asmodean kind of go together is they are similar in that they are the two weakest in raw power by men and women. The men and the women, they are the two weakest, and there is an element of, and were often questions of, why is this person even one of the Forsaken?
Mhm.
And in answer to that, I don't remember if it was to Asmodean or to Moghedien. No, I think it was Asmodean. Is Jordan said, I'm paraphrasing, he didn't hold a lot of field commands, but Asmodean was a very good administrator, and even the Dark needed administrators.
And
And
everybody that watches the channel knows my opinion on administrators.
exactly,
Yeah.
they were Moghedien and Asmodean were the prime HR directors of the Shadow. And the way the phrase he used is that what the Dark One in the Shadow valued most was ruthlessness and efficiency. And they
which
were
which
both very high in that regard.
which is where I think I was going to jump in, and you just put me right there. Is the show made her sadist,
Mhm.
but she's psychopathic. Okay, and knowing that she was the advisor for investments, the administrator, we have a thing called corporate psychopathy.
Mhm.
I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing my job, and the end product is psychopathic. And Moghedien is just trying to get ahead. I mean, that's her justification with everything. I'm just trying to get ahead. I'll do whatever it takes. And
Mhm.
that's why she was the dark friend of admin, because not only is she just doing her job, she knows she's doing a bad thing,
But she
to,
doesn't care.
but she
This
doesn't
is
care.
she is using the tools that she has to get what she
Hmm.
wants. One of the things, so in reference to that, um, someone had asked about um Kundiar and the weaves necessary to make it. And RJ had said it's a different weave for men to use, and a man would have to discover it because it's not something the surviving male Forsaken were ever interested in. It was I'm quoting as best I can remember here is it was almost an accident that Moghedien even knew how. She only knew because of her fascination with expensive things.
Hmm. Okay.
So think about that. And I'd never thought about that before of how interesting it is that here you have the spider, the manipulator, the one sitting in the dark, and she knows how to make Kundiar. Well, of course she does, because it's an Age of Legends thing. So it's a specialized thing. And there's a degree of talent with a capital T involved
See,
with it as well.
I thought Elaine figured that out on her own, or Egwene,
She figured out how to make Tara and Griel on her own. She figured out that it was something she could do.
but Egwene had to learn it from Moghedien.
Egwene learned the weave, is the one who taught it to the other Aes Sedai after she learned it from Moghedien.
Okay, I miss. Yeah, okay. So if you miss something in 14,000 page books, you can forgive somebody.
Hmm. Hmm. And I thought that really interesting, and an interesting tidbit that I had missed before in her uh character is how nicely that um supports all that subtle foundational work that he had done before of yeah, that's another little clue as to she likes nice things. She likes expensive things. It is in large part her greed
Hmm.
that sent her to the shadow.
Well, and also people bring up, oh, she was more powerful than you think because of her use of compulsion. She was actually very sloppy with it. And the reason being is compulsion actually takes you taking initiative,
Mm.
where that wasn't her thing. Her thing was to move the letter or change a word in the thing you sent to change the whole meaning of it, that kind of stuff. Actual compulsion, she was clumsy. That's why Nynaeve was able to break out of it.
Oh, okay, here it is. I found the exact quote. This was from 2005 at Dragon Con. This is RJ quoted directly. It is an oddity that Moghedien even knew how to do this. It's just her fascination with things that are valuable. Um, the other interesting tidbit here too is the I'm curious where you were going to go with the psychology of Moghedien because um so we've referenced before the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Hmm.
Well, I is there a name for So generally, that is ascribed to people who aren't as smart as they think they are. Is
Capable.
there,
Capable's the word.
okay,
Because it wasn't,
capable.
yeah, it wasn't just grades.
It-
It was
okay.
ability in general. Yeah.
There is a similar effect, and I wonder if there is a term for this, which is, um, oh, who's the obnoxious dude who's really smart, so he thinks he knows everything? Neil deGrasse Tyson. The Neil deGrasse Tyson effect. I'm really freaking smart.
The man, if I ever could, I would debate. This is like
Yes.
this is like my bucket list right here. Yeah.
Yes. So he is a PhD astronomer. He knows physics, he knows astronomy. That's some
But he
high level
also
smart
thinks he
stuff.
knows physiology, which is where I would debate him.
So
Yeah.
because of that, he thinks he can pontificate as an expert on anything and everything. I think there's an element of that to Moghedien
Mm.
because so this is from 2013. And this is someone asked a question of Maria Simmons, who was the head researcher and note collator for Jordan, and then for Sanderson when she was helping him, get ready to write the last books. Someone asked, "How is it that Egwene was able to override the Adam in the dream world when Moghedien couldn't? Was she just not as good as she thought she was?" Maria, yeah, pretty much. She thought she knew everything, referring to Moghedien there. But when Perrin went in and was, it's just a weave, it kind of changed the parameters in Egwene's mind. Because remember, this happens to Egwene later when Masana
Hmm.
catches her. And she's able to say, no, no. And for a moment, I think you see in that scene the difference between Egwene and Moghedien is that Egwene had gone through real serious trauma inducing trials that she was able to overcome. And then you
Yeah.
add on top of that Perrin giving her that last little bit in much the same way that Tam gives Rand the last little bit in their sparring session is it's just a weave.
Yeah, but I also would like to add another variable in there is I think Moghedien goes into the world of dreams in the flesh,
Mm.
which would make anything that happened to her. No, no, because you know what? That wouldn't have worked for the storyline because she was found being just blubbery.
Yes, she woke
Yeah, okay, so she would have had to been dreaming. Okay, never
because
mind.
Nynaeve gives
Disregard
her
all after
for
hello.
Groot
Yeah, yeah.
and they find her passed out.
Mm-hmm.
So she was so certain that she was the expert here that she couldn't fathom that someone could get one over on her. And that's why the Adam worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work on Egwene because for all of her faults and for as infuriating as she could be, she did have a degree of humility, at least compared to Moghedien.
Okay, okay, so compared to one of the Forsaken, okay, we'll give you that one.
Compared
Yeah.
to one of the Forsaken,
Yeah.
she had been humble. Better way to put it, she didn't have humility, which is what's so frustrating about her, but she had been humbled multiple times.
Hmm.
She didn't just go, okay, I'm done with my accepted test now. I'm going to tell off the Amarillan and the Keeper and just leave. Ugh.
That was probably top 10 worst moments
Yeah, of the first 3 seasons
of
in
all of
total.
it. Yeah, all of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Because
Uh
that was very much a non-heroic thing to do. That is something that
a
the
whiny
the
little brat does.
the Forsaken, the well, speaking of whiny brats, look at Moghedien when she is humbled. She breaks.
Yeah, but the thing is there is a little contradiction here because she might be a little bipolar is not the word because you would go through phases of this, but
Mhm,
she might be a little borderline because it flips on a switch because she was able to be what was it what was her name? Gildan. She
mhm.
was able to be Gildan, but then she was not humble later. So she might have associative disorder or something where she is one person one time and another person another time, and it just flips like boom, 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 boom,
Well,
boom,
I
boom, boom,
think
boom.
though, I think she was able to be Gildan because she knew
She had
she was
pre-planned it.
actually in charge.
Yeah.
She knew. So like she says later when she reveals herself, "Oh, are you worried that you punished one of the Forsaken?" And she just totally compulsed the guy who was supposed to punish her and into he believed he had done what he was told to, and he felt bad about it, and and all this stuff. But then also she knew, yeah, I may be the weak among the Forsaken, but I'm not weak compared to these so-called Aes Sedai, because when Leandrin does try and challenge her, Moghedien slaps her down hard.
Which is funny. That actually makes me want to bring this passage in from the cheat book here. When she was under Shidar Heron, where she was
Mm,
uh, graped a
yep.
lot. It says few women would have survived those attractions with their sanity intact, but she did, partly by letting the Murdral break her. By letting the Murdral break her. It was not pretense. Long before the end, she was ready to do anything the Murdral wanted. She strategized
Hmm.
using his
Hmm.
power over her to not go insane. I mean, where did that square with the circle that you just brought up is what I want to know.
Um, wow. Talk about dissociative disorder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe a little Stockholm along with it. And it just, this is where I think the psychopathy comes in because one thing that is talked about by people like Sapolsky and Peterson and let me think who else, Height, all these people on psychopathy is they can't even have empathy for their future selves.
Hmm.
And she may just be like, this is how I get through this. I don't care what the end result is, as long as I'm alive.
That's what I meant by dissociative. Is the only thing I can think is knowing what we know about her and how she behaves otherwise. Is I would think that at some point she made, and you know what, as the spider, as the web weaver, as the person that has plan A through Z just in case, she may have already considered this possibility at some point and decided, if something like this ever happens, this is how I'm going to react. This is
Hmm.
how I'm going to deal with it. So I'm going to lock away the part of me that is me in the back of my mind, and then let myself be broken so that I can move on to the next step.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's not as successful as people think it is because they think they can just do it at will, but some people can compartmentalizing, right?
And I would also think she has to feel, I given her longer experience with the shadow and with the dark one, is she would know what Isam knew even more so, which is, yeah, you'll be punished, but the dark one doesn't throw away tools, and I'm a useful tool.
Hmm.
This is gonna hurt.
Oh, we get that in the last book where
Mm,
she's pretending to be Demandred and she's going forward. She's like, I'm going to do something that makes them want to keep me around even though I failed. That was actually her train of thought the whole time.
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was um one of the better moments in the whole last battle sequence, is
I thought it was
because it
clumsy, but I
th-
liked the internal dialogue. Yeah.
I liked the way it, I liked the way that point of view was written so much better than a lot of the others, because I really thought it both gave you great insight into Moghedien, but also kind of redeemed her. Not in the light versus dark way, obviously, but redeemed her as a legitimate and significant antagonist. Because one of the complaints about the Forsaken in the middle part of the series is they keep getting beaten. And this is her going, I can turn this into my favor.
Hmm.
I
She ends up a
yeah,
dominate, but
yeah.
which in
It
the real
doesn't
world, not
work,
yeah, not
but
in the
yeah.
but at the same time, this is where it. Not that I'm sad that he's passed because of future work that he could have done. I'm sad that he passed because of human being, but this would have been a good follow-up because we have a Forsaken that is put into Shanshan captivity that has already experienced getting out of it.
Hmm.
And we have a Lyda who could have been in the same place. We could have had a reunion of people, one just being bad and one being evil, and a coalition of how do we get out of this because we're both very strong women.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You
And
could have you could
how
have had this outrigger that is the next thing that comes into the world is these two people joining forces and
I feel like Alida is the kind of person, much like Leandrin, who is perfectly set up to be manipulated by Moghedien.
no, I actually think Elida would have succeeded where Leandrin failed.
See, I don't, because Alida, one of her great failings is she had never really experienced failure
Yeah,
and
but
didn't
what
know how
an
to
arc.
deal
You're in
with
an
it.
Adam. This is what brought Egwene's storyline into fruition
But
was her
that's why
experience there.
I think she would have ended up like one of the others. I don't remember which one it was, but when Matt was scheming to get oh shoot, who was the red that he rescued?
Oh,
He
started with T.
yeah, anyway, um but so when he rescues those Aes Sedai, there's another one, and um someone makes the comment of well, we have to get her too, and and is told no, that one's broken. She will go straight to the nearest soul dam,
Mm-hmm.
beg to be recollared, and then rat us out. I think Elida would be like that. I think she would be one of those who fell so far so hard that it would break her.
Yeah, that's a good argument, but at the same time, it would make for a great story if she showed how
Yeah,
strong she was to be the
I
thing that ended up
I
happening.
think there are a few characters that in hindsight, I think may have been purposely used to illustrate why Rand needed laughter and tears.
Mm-hmm.
Because and I think Elida is one of those. Elida never learns to be strong. She is always hard. And so she
Tarna.
cracks.
Tarna.
Tarna.
Yeah.
So she cracks under the pressure eventually.
But at the same time, Tarna is part of Matt's development because remember, she was what were supposed to expect a red to be.
Mhm.
But we have Jolene,
And
who is
she ends
supposed to
up
be, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Matt ends up winning her over more than the green, who
Hmm.
should be more naturally inclined to be with Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And she actually turned out to she was part of the crew with Pavaro, right? That left the tower to go meet the men, right?
Hmm.
So it's that was the genius of Jordan's storytelling that people are not getting right now. And Moghedien being one of portrayed the way she is right now is not pulling that off because she was supposed to be something different. And we've talked about combining her with Simmerage, which actually would make sense the way they played her.
Hmm.
But we have in the show them saying Simmerage exists. So is Simmerage going to be Masana? We don't know, right? But no, she's a complete psychopath. That's the thing. She is what is useful to me right now,
Yes.
just like HR.
Yep. Yeah. Well,
I work for myself, by the way. I cannot deal with
the
these
scene I
people.
referenced when Leandrin tried to make her move and Malkavian slapped her down is she's domineering over this group of Black Ajah, but when she gets wounded in the dream world by Nynaeve or Birgitte, I can't remember which one, and she goes to them for healing. So she's not opposed to being in a vulnerable position because she has to have it right now. She needs healing right now.
Hmm.
This is what I need, and so this is what I'll do. And then
It's very lizard
yeah,
brain, which is what we talk about with psychopaths. They're very lizard brain. What is this exact moment, and how can I? They have they have no impulse control. So if I need to be healed right now, that's what's going to happen. If I need to dominate this person right now, that's what's going to happen. And that's where she gets in trouble because she attacks Nynaeve in a place
yes.
where she wasn't like ready to do so.
All right. So from HR psychopath manipulator to Asmodean, and how do you classify him?
Okay, so if you fast forwarded to this, as we suggested earlier, he's my dad. So this is where this is going to get interesting because it's true. It actually really has a lot of parallel to this, and especially even after the stuff you sent me. So we'll go into the stuff you sent me too. But you have a person who's very talented, who wants to be famous, and who would uh, ultimately make a deal with the devil to do so, right? In prepping for this mentally, I watched the Devil at the Crossroads again, and a fabulous documentary. But at the same time, I had family that said he stated to them that he made a deal with the devil to have his ability to play the guitar, which he was fantastic, but he never got famous because he was always making deals with the devil. Example, this may or may not be true, but it is slightly believable. He claims he wrote the guitar part to the dance by Garth Brooks and sold it for $3,000. There's your deal with the devil. Someone else is famous because of the thing you did, because you needed the thing right now. That is the whole point of the phrase deal with the devil. What am I getting right now and what am I losing in the long run? That may or may not be true, but that is one of the stories that came out of a lot of things that might have been.
For
And
those that don't know, Devil at the Crossroads is a great documentary on Netflix about Robert Johnson,
yeah, the
who
greatest, the beginning of blues.
th this
Well,
was in
blues,
the
mainstream blues.
30s.
Yeah.
Yes. So this was in the 30s. So this was in the transition from jazz in the teens and the 20s, and now other inspirations and musical traditions were taking that and turning it into what became the blues. And Johnson was an incredibly influential figure in what's called the Delta blues, which is Louisiana, Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta.
The
And
place where of his persuasion you didn't want to be famous.
exactly,
Yeah.
especially as a black man.
That's what I was
Um,
saying, his persuasion.
yeah,
I didn't want
yeah.
you to get us canceled by saying it out loud.
But I mean, this is
Mm.
1930s. This is Jim Crow segregation South.
1930s
But
Mississippi was the place where
the
everybody's arguments are legitimate.
the story
Yeah.
came about because he was an okay guitar player. He disappears for a while. He comes back and he's phenomenal.
Not only phenomenal, but innovative.
Yes.
He added a string to the guitar. He was doing things that no one ever thought possible. And yeah.
So the names like BB King, and those guys, the old school blues guys, for names that you would know in popular culture, they trace their roots back to this guy.
Hmm.
And so the story went because this was an old timey tradition. I think that goes all the way back to Grimm's fairy tales. The idea that late at night or midnight is often, or on a new moon or a full moon, depends on who you asked. You need to be careful because at a crossroads you could meet the devil. Which isn't isn't that one of the worst places to run into a dark hound? Now that I recall,
Yes, it was.
yeah.
Well, and
So
also just his name, Asmodean, in a lot of mythical text is the devil that will
mm,
make the deal with you. So, yeah.
yeah, and so then you have this Forsaken that literally, and Rand can't believe this, but of course it's perfectly believable for anyone who's ever looked at the dark side of humanity of, wait a minute, you sold your soul to the devil, which is what the dark one is in this world,
Or art.
so you could have immortality to keep making your art.
Hmm.
Makes perfect sense to Asmodean.
Which actually, think about entertainers. If you know any entertainers in your life, yeah, yeah, they will. But let's get back to the root of the term. So sell your soul to the devil. What is good right now that I may pay for later? One of the things about the deal with the devil is you have to be so specific, you cannot be screwed later. So I'm going to bring an example up we've talked about many times, addiction. So look at artists, David Bowie, Carrie Fisher, uh, Tom Petty, all of these artists that died in their late 50s. Look at how things were done in the 70s when they were becoming big was you basically drank all day, socialized, and then you sniffed some lines to bring it on for the show, especially these Saturday Night Live people.
Mm.
And not to be sued for defamation there, but that I've heard stories. Don't know if they're true. Alleged. Okay. So, but at the same time, this seems to be the pattern. And yeah, you're up. Your show is good. Wolf of Wall Street. We got a show there, right? Your game is up because of this thing you're doing, and you're becoming successful because of it. But there's a price. There's always a price. And the price is the thing you don't anticipate. That's the deal with the devil. That is the metaphor that is going on. What is the price you're paying down the road for the thing you're doing? Are you lying to get ahead right now? Well, there's going to be a price for that later because someone's going to discover the lie, right? Are you doing a drug to have a higher performance in sport? Well, something's going to happen down the road. You may have hypertrophy of the left ventricle and die, right? So all of these things, that's the deal with the devil. And Asmodean made the ultimate deal with the devil in getting with the Dark One to be famous again.
And speaking of lying, this is from the wiki of Asmodean was noted, while his administrations were not particularly brutal compared to the other Forsaken, Asmodean was noted for one signature atrocity. Any musician or artist whose work he had disapproved of before the war, especially those he considered his former rivals, was blinded and or otherwise maimed. There was no other torture involved. Asmodean's victims were simply rendered incapable of practicing their art, then released.
Which would be funny if one of them came out. Oh, why am I blanking on the name? Charles, Ray Charles.
Mm.
He was blinded, and then he's all of a sudden coming out there just belting on the piano and doing his thing. That would have
Yep.
been funny. But not that it's funny that he was blind, but he's famous enough. So uh Jamie Foxx, one of his finest performances, by the
Mm.
way. Talk about good acting that we were talking about earlier. But no, yeah, he was petty. That was his sin. He was petty. He
Yes.
he thought in the here and now. And that comes in a lot of forms. And when I bring that with my dad, so he's right there, right there. There is ashes. I talked with my late sister's grandfather after she passed, and he would talk about her and the way he was. He was a freaking genius. He really was. but he would use it in ways that you were like, what the hell? He would hide meth in light bulbs so no one would find it because no one's going to plug in a light bulb to see if there's meth in there, right? And all of these things. And he would always say, if you had used this for good, how awesome would your life have been? Asmodean was that way. He
Mm.
was petty. He was single-minded. He was in the here and now. He wanted it now, whether that was drugs or whether that was women or whether that was fame. He wanted it now. And then you brought forward the child
Yeah, so
actor,
this was really interesting to me, and this was really annoying because there are over 100 entries in the Asmodean section of the Theoryland Q&A database, and there are only like 2 to 5 that don't deal with who killed Asmodean, which is infuriating.
which this book tells you that Grendel did it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this is what was really
Spoiler
interesting to
alert.
me. So this is all the way back in 1996 at a Crown of Swords signing, and this is a paraphrased response. Jordan had also mentioned Asmodean and the fact that Asmodean was a child prodigy who in adulthood, and remember, Age of Legends, and he's a channeler, adulthood's a really long effing time.
Hmm.
Anyway, in adulthood could never equal or come to grips with what he did as a child. He always felt that if he could live just a little bit longer, he could surpass what musical feats he performed in the past. So you have someone who,
Someone who was part of a system that was the overbearing mother
mm,
because he was pushed forward before he was ready and made loved because of the thing he did. Again, going back, we suspect as a family that there was a little bit of Munchausen's by proxy with my grandmother, who he was her one of the two that she had with my grandfather of many, and he was the darling. And we see how that turned out. It was and so when we talk about the overbearing mother, it is the always projecting forward, you are the apple of my eye from your mother. Society can do that too. Justin Bieber. Look at look at the things that are going on now. Listen to actually I feel bad because I always hated his music, but now I listen to the lyrics after the new information is coming out and I'm actually pretty ashamed that I thought that about him a little bit. Uh Look at child stars in general. How
well,
many of them?
that is what I was going to
Yeah.
bring up is there's a very interesting. So I'm having a lot of fun reading my son's texts as he's reading through the first time here and figuring things out or thinking he's figuring things out, and then I have to bite my tongue and go,
He's figuring out more than we did at his age.
yeah, I think so. And
The ones you're sending me, I'm like, gosh, I didn't even think about that till I was
yeah,
40.
but one of the things I keep pointing out, because they'll say, hey, this is like that, is like on the Grail,
Hmm.
right?
Oh, that one I
Except
figured out when I was 13. Come on.
except not. It's just it was one of the most recent ones because he was talking about Kalendor because he's at that point in the book, and so it's this idea of the sword and the stone, this idea of the search for the Grail. So he's taking these Arthurian influences, but then tweaking them. Asmodean, the child star, but how does the child star usually work out in our world? They either go nuts and die early, or they gain 300 pounds and fall off into obscurity, or, all this self destructive behavior. Asmodean's self destructive behavior was more interestingly focused.
Well, we also have a metaphysic involved here.
Yes.
We have a literal devil you can make a deal with versus just little things like, I mean, because where he was, I mean, until the War of Power started, there would have been nothing like coke and meth and alcoholism and everything. They actually described that world as a utopia.
Hmm.
So there may have been limited options in those areas, and all of a sudden something came forward and he said, "Yes, that's it. That is the thing." And he took it. So and this is the thing about fiction is we get caricatures, right?
Hmm.
And he is a caricature of all of those other things you talked about because we make those deals with the devil all the time. Even as even as good functioning people, we make a deal with the devil sometimes. I got to deal with the devil right here.
Uh, um, but also the whole uh Aesop's fable, folklore, Grimm's fairy tale idea of the deal with the devil is it is almost always the easy quote unquote way out, but it's not actually easy. It's actually self-harm.
Yep, but that's the thing. That Peterson's definition of addiction is I know I'm hurting myself in the long run, but I want the thing now.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is the thing. So like I said, I held this up. It's a beer if you're just listening. I held this beer up. I said this is a deal with the devil because it makes talking easier. It makes feeling okay right now. I just got off a 3-day hantavirus puking and shitting every 5 seconds uh thing, and well, the first day I feel good, I'm having a beer, and it's like, yeah, because it feels good right now, but how is that affecting me in the long run? I don't care about that as much. That's human nature.
Well,
and
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 so
we
the next sentence of the wiki is the more well known because Lanfear specifically mentions this in the book very directly is he is also known for having severed his Aes Sedai mother and given her to the Murdral
Mhm.
for sport.
Which is Oedipus. This is nothing new. I talked about the overbearing mother. Freud was right, and all you Freud haters can just F yourself.
Well,
The
there's
dog the
also
dogs don't agree, apparently.
but there's also a really dark analogy there with the child star because how many times have you heard about abuse of a child star and wondered where the hell were the parents? Well, a lot of times they
They
were,
were participating.
yeah,
What we're learning from the Diddy files is the parents were selling their children to
they
this
were
life. They
facilitating
were
it
facilitating it.
for the
And that's why I brought up
instant
Oedipus,
gratification.
because they talk about the Oedipus complex from a sexual standpoint, but he also hated his mother. And people don't get that. He hated
Mhm.
his mother. He wanted to kill her. And I think he ultimately did
I think
or
so.
facilitated her death. Yeah.
It's been a long time since I read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the part that people miss is what Freud said wasn't that everybody wants to have sex with their mom. What he was saying was the overbearing mother doesn't allow people to mature properly. And then it creates a sexual bond that ultimately ends in resentment.
I hadn't really thought about it before, but I think Asmodean is maybe a prime example of what Rand says when after his integration, and so he's got all the loose Therid memories, and I think it's when he's talking to Avienda, and he says, basically, we thought we lived in a utopia. We considered it that. But as I look back on it now, the cracks were already there. They were just under the surface. That's what the
Go
Dark One exploited.
go to the last episode and find the spot where I talk about chimps versus bonobos. Because yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I was going to
Yeah.
explain it further, but I'm going to leave it at that. And anybody that says, "Oh, your points are moot," there's 100,000, 150,000 years of evolution that go behind my points. So you're going to have to come up with more than moot. I'm sorry.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, any other thoughts about Asmodean?
Uh, Maybe we can delve a little bit into his relationship with Rand because he does switch a little bit. And what this is one of the things I actually don't like about what Jordan did is I think we could have made more clear why he was so important for Grendel to kill.
Mm,
Because I think there is a redemption arc that might have been there, but I think Jordan just had him dead instead because he left it at the I'm hanging on to a tuft of grass, basically.
yes, yes.
And that's fine because we all understand the motivation of I'm just trying to survive, as we just talked about with Moggy, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, there were a lot of moments where I think he went a little deeper than that. And if you're thinking about an artist, you have to add emotion to the
Mm.
equation a little bit more because that's how they live. That is their life.
A good example of that is because I think there is some genuine emotion, some genuine fear there. And it's probably mostly self-preservation, which is certainly what he says to justify it. But when Rand is brought in after having nearly killed himself or burnt himself out in the fight around Kareen,
Hmm.
and the kind of the last thing he sees before he loses consciousness is Asmodean embracing the source and channeling Sidon. And Asmodean says later that he did what he could. And he says it cryptically because there are other people in the room, but basically, I added to their healing with what little I have because I'm in your boat now, Captain, and
Hmm.
I'm part of this now. And I think there is an
Which
element of emotion in that scene, but
and
we
when
don't
the
get
and
time to
it
play it out.
also creates a difference between him and Moggy, right?
Mm,
Because Moggy understood as long as I just do the thing and keep going, I'll be okay with the Dark One. Asmodean actually had an emotional connection to where he was at the moment,
mm,
where he's not like, oh, you know what? If I just let this happen right now, maybe I'll be rewarded later. That would have been a Moggy kind of statement. But he was like, no, actually, my survival depends on you surviving. So either he was more in tune with what Ishimoridan wants than Moggy is, or he actually had developed an emotional connection. One of the two. Because the calculus was wrong. All he had to do was let him die, and then he wins for the dark one.
or better yet, let him get burnt out because then he's more
Hmm.
susceptible to turning
Yeah, because
to
we hadn't
defeat.
gotten to the Order of the Lord of Chaos yet.
Yeah, that's true. The no kill order
Hmm.
hasn't been implemented yet, so that's a good point. Is that would be it might be a long shot. It might be not great odds, but it's probably better odds than you would have otherwise. Of hey, I made sure while he was weak that he died. I didn't turn. I was in a bad situation, but my loyalties were always with the great Lord of the Dark,
Hmm.
and I made sure that his greatest foe died. Of course, I'm still with you. Take me back, you know. Um, but there may have been an element of because we do get some scenes where they're together, where um, Rand genuinely appreciates Asmodean's music. He generally appreciates
Hmm.
his, because there were some times where he's like reading something and he's like, "Hey, what do you make of this?" Where he appreciates his intellect, his ability to analyze, and give counsel in that regard. That would be very appealing to someone like Asmodean.
Hmm. Which is one of the things that they talk about with modern music and the internet and everything's online, Spotify or whatever. The difference between being at a concert
Mm,
and being or listening to the exact same song in a studio version has been shown to have extreme psychological implications. And a lot of people say, oh, it's the hive mind of the people in the concert. But actually, they figured out it is the mind of the person composing the music.
Hmm.
because they are feeding on the inputs from the mind that is the audience. And so they're actually performing better than they've ever performed in their entire life from an emotional standpoint.
That was the thing that I heard a number of people who were friends of his point out after he died, that while they liked having that last bit of Norm Macdonald material, it was hard to watch that, basically his last special, because he was on death's door, where it was just him looking at a camera at his computer. And they all, like, there was this, um after his memorial, Conan O'Brien, and I can't remember who else was there, David Letterman, all people who were very close with Norm, and they all said, I mean, it was Norm, but it wasn't Norm, because what made him Norm was his ability to work a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And not in the same way that, like, one of my favorite comedians currently is Carr, because because when he works a crowd, he will roast a crowd. If you heckle him, he will destroy you, and it's hilarious. Norm worked a crowd differently, and the best examples of that are his, what I think was his best material, which was weekend update jokes that would bomb, and he would just let it hang there until it was funny, and he somehow managed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that a true artist knows how to work a crowd,
Oh yeah, even if it's
consciously
just a
or
little bar, you
unconsciously.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you there are local bands that uh we'll have around here that come around for maybe like a 4th of July festival or something. And the they're always brought back because they work the crowd. They're not better musically, they're not better vocally.
Mm,
They're playing cover songs, but they're actually getting people engaged. And I think if you're even if you're a slightly psychopathic musician, that is your motivation. That is your impulse. And Asmodean would have gotten a kick from that from Rand's comments. And men hanging around probably helped too, but you
yeah. Well, so final my final thoughts on Asmodean, because I found this really amusing, um, is, so it was kind of infuriating that there are over 100 entries into the Q&A database for Asmodean, and like I said, almost all of them, only a handful are about anything to do other than people asking who killed him, which is annoying because the answer is always Raffo, read and find out, RJ's favorite saying.
Mhm.
But what I did find funny is Sanderson, a couple of times he was asked, when you were first brought in, what was it that you first wanted to know or wanted to see? And he said two things. He said this multiple times. The first thing I wanted to read was the ending, because RJ had always said he had already written the ending, and I wanted to see it, just as a fan, as well as the person who has to get us from here to there. So he wanted to read the ending, and he said, you know, it was beautiful and satisfactory was the words he used. Is that it wasn't necessarily the way I would have done it. It wasn't necessarily what fans might be expecting, but it gave me an immense sense of satisfaction, which I thought was a beautiful tribute to RJ. The other thing he said is, and I asked Harriet, who killed Asmodean? Amusingly, now I had not come across this before, but in preparation for Sanderson coming in to take over, RJ had printed out something that someone had somehow gotten his attention to. He had printed it out and put a post-it note on it that simply said, quote, "This is right." And that was all the notes he had on Asmodean, which I found hilarious. So if you want a fun read on who killed Asmodean and why, do a search for Sherlock Holmes examines the death of Asmodean. Somebody wrote a really funny dialogue, and they managed to do a good job of getting the voice of Sherlock and Watson right. And it's this back and forth between Sherlock and Watson in Sherlock Holmes's style of deduction of who killed Asmodean. And so if you want a fun read for the big question about Asmodean, um, which is less interesting to me, um, go there for a fun read. Uh,
Well, I'm not going to be as fun in my closing thoughts. Wow. Okay. I am going to watch that. So Moggy she's a psychopath. She's corporate
yeah.
psychopathy 101. But Asmodean, as we looked at kind of background evidence, is there's a
Which
part of me that actually I feel because I did know my dad, and I feel for these child stars that come out, and I think he just wanted to be loved.
mm,
Now, the problem is when you're successful and popular and all of these things when you're very young, the standard of love elevates to a thing that is unreasonable when it could be just someone just wanting to spend time with you instead of everybody knowing your name all the time and coming to see you by the thousands. And when that happens at a young age, you're you're going to be in a state that will create bad decisions late in life, and you will be psychopathic because of it. Because
that- yeah. So let me see what you think about this, because you just reminded me of something, a thought I had that I forgot to bring up, which was when I read that quote from RJ about Asmodean being a child prodigy. It occurred to me, did he actually never achieve the heights that he had, or did he only think he didn't? Because how many people listened to his music in his later life and
the
still
the
enjoyed it?
way I read
Still
what you
thought,
said to me was he got that impression and then it went away. And so when your standard is set as a child, everything else follows. And I mean, we can go to therapy, but it's really difficult to flip the
mm-hmm,
switch.
mm-hmm.
So if you have the overbearing mother and she's always doting on you, then every wife you ever have is going to be set to that standard, right? So it's this is a tale as old as time that what we experience when we're children influences how we live as adults. And he experienced his highest of highs as a child, which made him desperate as an adult. And again, we add that
But
to a
also may
metaphysical
have,
universe where he had to deal with the devil.
created a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where no matter how much he was praised for his later work, he may have fixated on the criticisms.
Oh no,
Because
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, you're right. The negativity bias that goes with that.
the other thought I had, that which is where I find the devil at the crossroads analogy really interesting, is one of the things my son texted me, and I mostly bit my tongue, but I did feel the need to respond and say, keep reading and let me know if your analysis changes, because he mentioned that one of the things he really liked about The Dragon Reborn is we finally get a Matt point of view. And I made the point, I don't know if I said this at the time, of I don't know if he did this on purpose or if he backed himself into a corner, but in the first two books, RJ kind of couldn't give you a Matt point of view because Matt was under the influence of the dagger.
Hmm.
And so, had he given you a Matt point of view, he's either going to be giving you a warped view of who Matt is, or he's going to be giving away too much information about what the evil of the dagger is.
Hmm.
And so when you first see Matt in The Dragon Reborn and he's doing these incredible things, my son's take on it, his nerdy analogy was, Matt is someone who hasn't bothered to put points in his skills, but he keeps rolling a nat 20. And my first thought was actually, no, you've got that completely inverted, but I didn't want to say that. Actually, I think a better analogy of what Matt is, and in this actually correlates with Asmodean, is that you could call Asmodean high IQ, low achiever. Now, the low achiever may have been in his own mind because he was so successful early on and he couldn't get where he wanted to go, but he had all this innate ability. Matt was high IQ, high skill, low achiever because he never had to. He was the kid in the small town who was, I'm the best quarterstaff guy there is, other than my dad, who always wins at bell time, and he's the one who taught me.
And what happened when we got to the university where things were hard?
What happened when you got to the
Yeah,
university
yeah,
when things were hard? Well,
yeah.
when you got to the university where everyone's good at the quarterstaff and everybody is charismatic because they grew up in a metropolitan area. Well, but the difference is Asmodean took the easy way out. He took the deal with the devil.
Hmm.
Matt was high IQ, low achieving until he was forced to make an effort. And no matter how much he complains about his friends who the creator didn't give the sense that the creator gave a bloody goat or how unfair the pattern is, he still tried. He still put in the effort because he had to. And that's when he really elevates himself. Because now you take all of that underlying, that foundational skill, and now you're building on it because you're actually doing.
Well, I appreciate that. You took my negative and made it a positive, which
Yay.
is no, it's actually a good thing because I like that comparison because the negative was because Asmodean ended negatively, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the positive is you had a similar situation that someone came through properly. And yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you could take life lessons from that.
Yeah, you could call Matt, all three of the boys, the girls too. They're all child prodigies.
Hmm.
But then that's not enough. The reason they become heroes is because what they do with that underlying skill. So there you go. What are you going to do with your underlying skill? Go to the crossroads at midnight on a full moon, or
Well,
buckle down and see
midnight,
what you can
noon, and
do.
nothing ever happens at noon that's interesting, except for a potluck at the church. Okay. Then you get some church's chicken. But
Oh yeah, that's the
oh,
good
oh,
stuff.
you know what? We do not have a church's nearby.
That's terrible.
That is terrible. The closest we got is a Popeyes. So yeah, Popeyes is good, but it's not churches. Oh.
No, no. All right. Well, now I want fried chicken, so we will end it
And
there.
I'm glad I am not, it is too late to go get it. So for me, so
All right, and we will see y'all next time where we will finally put an end to the discussion of God versus secular in a moral society. We will
we
solve it.
will not put an end to that.
Yeah, probably not.
We will put a pin in it. How about that?
It's only a debate that's been going on for millennia. I'm sure we can
Yeah,
solve
probably
it.
even more than that.
Yep. All right. Well, we will see y'all then.